For folks who don't know who you are, can you explain a little bit about you and your work with the ACLU?
Yes, my name is John Boehler. I'm the policy counsel at the ACLU of Minnesota. So that means I primarily work in the legislative realm and also with local governments doing policy work. But also, depending on how busy we are, sometimes I do get pulled into the litigation realm as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And this Saturday, we're expecting thousands of Minnesotans to march in St. Paul. We've seen, and frankly, in other cities across the state, as we've been talking about, we've seen Minnesotans step up in remarkable ways to protect their neighbors. Over 30,000 people trained as constitutional observers, tens of thousands attending and hosting peaceful protests. From the ACLU's perspective, what does it mean that so many people are showing up to defend people's rights? What does that tell you about where we are right now?
Yeah, I'm glad you hit on some of those numbers because that is what we've seen these last few months with these 30,000 observers with these protests. I think we're scheduled for almost 80 No Kings protests around the state, expecting tens of thousands in the capital. And I think what Minnesotans have come to appreciate these past few months is that the Constitution and the constitutional protections and the Bill of Rights are like living and breathing things. They apply to everyday life and how Minnesotans and how people living in Minnesota think that these rights and understand these rights apply to them. They have really practical purposes. They have practical purposes in protesting. They have practical purposes and practical protections, in due process and how you're treated, how you have access to counsel, and just in the various ways that we saw the federal government overreaching and stepping on those rights, trampling those rights, I guess is a better way to say it. You know, I think Minnesotans and people have always appreciated their constitutional rights, but it's seeing how they're impacted and how important they are into your day to day is something that we've seen over the past few months.
Absolutely. I think you mentioned a couple of them, but what do you see as the most urgent rights and freedoms that the ACLU is watching right now in terms of protecting them for both Minnesota and across the country?
Yeah, it's hard. We've seen violations. When I talk about it, violations of the First, Second, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, and 10th Amendments just here in Minnesota and just in the past few months. And what we're concerned about, and what we're continuing to discuss, is how the courts have been finding in people's favor. I think the federal government has lost nearly 7,000 court cases in the last 6 months. On related to immigration enforcement and around the country, not necessarily here, but what we've seen, Judge Schiltz, our chief judge of the U.S. District Court here in Minnesota, has found over 200 orders violated, which when it was only 100 orders violated, he still said that ICE had violated more orders in 1 month in one state than most agencies had in their history. And so the constitutional order that we've all taken, that we've all lived under for so long is dependent on both those rights and the court's ability to enforce those rights. And the court is vindicating what our residents are seeing and what our litigators are arguing. And we're just not seeing the federal government either, abiding by those orders or taking to heart what the courts are saying to them about the need for better constitutional safeguards.
Yeah, well said. When Donald Trump's administration takes actions that push legal boundaries, what role do everyday people, marchers, observers, community members play alongside the legal work the ACLU does?
That's a great question. I mean, it is the foundation for all of that legal work. The ACLU is not a party to these lawsuits. Our Tincher lawsuit is Jamie Tincher. She's the named plaintiff. There are a few others on there, and there's over 115 declarants at this point. And what you do in those cases, and that's our First Amendment case with Fourth Amendment implications as well, but it's protecting the rights of protesters and observers documenting ICE's actions. It's due to those people on the ground, and it's due to the people like Jamie Tincher and the other plaintiffs and the other declarants who are out there every day protecting their rights. And it's helped. It helps with all of the other people who come in and record and document ICE's actions and help supplement those cases. And those are people proactively out there. And then our other major case, Hussein v. Noam, is Mubashir Hussein, who's just a 20-year-old American citizen who just was racially profiled and was illegally detained and was held by the government simply for appearing to be an immigrant, which just means that he's a man of Somali descent who is living here and living his everyday life. And so what we have on those two cases are both ends of the spectrum of people who were actively out there watching and protecting and protesting, and people who were just going about their daily life and whose rights ICE violated. But who are willing to step up and willing to take their actions to the court, and fight the federal government, which is no small task, particularly how this federal government has retaliated against people who have stood up to them.
Yeah, absolutely. For someone showing up on Saturday at one of the rallies across the state, what's the next step after marching? What should they know about how tools like protest and legal action reinforce each other?
Yep, that's another good question. There are know your rights trainings that the ACLU offers, that the Immigrant Defense Network offers, Monarca. We've gotten pretty good at providing these trainings, both within our organization and the other organizations we're seeing. There will be organizations, I think, at various protests. I'm sure the St. Paul protest will have most of them, but I think around the state there will be as well. Getting involved in your local community, getting to know your neighbors, getting trained on what you can ask, what you can do, how you can observe, and what to do with those recordings to make sure that you're protecting your community and your neighbors is one of those ongoing processes. There's a lot that needs to be rebuilt after Operation Metro Surge. There's a lot of protections that need to remain in place at the local level, both ensuring that our neighbors, can afford their rent, can pay their groceries, are safely able to get to school and to church, or to their other houses of worship. And then there's things that can be done at every level of government at this point. Certainly the federal government, when you're talking to your federal representatives, you can start to restrain and restrict how DHS and how ICE operates. At the state level, there's policies that we're pushing and that other organizations are pushing to help protect Minnesotans and Minnesota residents from the federal government, and kind of, not impede, but kind of restrict and get us back to, how immigration enforcement was done years ago. And then even at the local level, at the city councils and the counties, there's a lot of pressure to ensure that the cities and the counties are doing what they can to protect their residents, that they're not overly collaborating, cooperating with ICE, that they're not, that their law enforcement remains doing what they're doing best, which is protecting Minnesotans, and not doing immigration enforcement on behalf of the federal government. And those are, there are ways to get involved. There are actions being taken and basically at every level of government to supplement the protests, and to kind of provide a proactive vent for that anger.
Well, that's really reassuring to hear all that work is going into making sure that everybody is safe and protected legally as they participate in these marches. I would love, obviously we see Donald Trump and his allies waging this retribution campaign on Minnesota since he is sworn into the second term. What would you say to Minnesotans who are feeling tired or discouraged? What are you seeing that gives you confidence and hope that showing up still matters?
Yeah, I think it's understandable, particularly after the winter we've had and the months we've had. What we've told people and we've asked, we've had to remind people over and over again is that it's a marathon and not a sprint. That this presidential term runs through 2028. And there are opportunities in upcoming midterms and other elections to try to restrict what the executive branch can do. But that people need to find the small victories. They need to take the time with their family, with their friends, and their community, and they need to kind of take those rests when they need to, but to kind of continue building for the future. And I think what Minnesota and what Minnesotans have shown the world really is what community looks like, and what community can do, and how important it is just to be standing there, bearing witness to what your neighbors are going through, to provide help in the ways you can. And people aren't necessarily built to fight every battle, but some people can do grocery shopping. Some people can help take children to and from school. Some people can, help bring religious services to people who are afraid to leave their homes. And so finding that niche, finding that hole that the federal government has blown in your community, and trying to fill it using your strengths and using your time without overtaxing yourself is just something that we expect and we've seen Minnesotans settle into, and really find that need. And I think that's kind of where we've been these last few months, is seeing just so much of it just being filling those holes and filling that community need, to to make sure that all Minnesotans are protected, and that we understand that we're standing here for each other.
Yeah, John, one of the things that we've been talking about is two things. First of all, Minnesotans are actually who Texans think they are. We're brave. We are willing to stand together. We are united. We are being, resourceful, and we're relying on one another to protect that community. And what that means is that Minnesotans are the heroes. Minnesotans are the heroes in this moment. And that's what I think people around the country are noticing.
Yeah, I think that's right, Richard.
Thank you, John, for being with us today. Have a great time at the march, and hopefully we'll see a bunch of you out there. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yep.